was not called. And then Cunningham gets in the...
Dijonai Carrington is losing it after Reebok made an offer to Sophie Cunningham to replace her, and the basketball world is processing what is happening as the most commercially specific and the most personally concentrated single commercial event in the Clark era's governance accountability story. Because the specific nature of what Reebok has done, making a formal commercial offer to the player who was most directly harmed by Carrington's conduct to fill the commercial space that Carrington's official ban and franchise firing have created in the athletic footwear commercial landscape, is the commercial accountability statement that transforms the governance accountability story from an institutional and disciplinary narrative into a commercial market accountability narrative whose specific mechanism and whose specific implications for every stakeholder in the Clark era's commercial ecosystem are the most directly measurable and the most immediately consequential commercial accountability development the governance accountability season has yet produced. Today, I am breaking down exactly what Reebok's offer to Cunningham involves and why the specific commercial mechanism the offer represents is the most market-specific accountability statement the Carrington situation has produced. Why Carrington losing it in response to the Reebok offer is the most commercially revealing individual reaction the Clark era's governance accountability story has generated. What the specific commercial logic of a brand making an offer to a player specifically to fill the commercial space a former partner's governance-driven departure has created, tells you about how the commercial ecosystem processes governance accountability in the most market-specific and the most commercially direct form available, and what the combination of the Reebok offer to Cunningham and Carrington losing it in response reveals about where the commercial dimension of the governance accountability story has arrived in its most consequential and its most personally concentrated chapter. And stay with me, because at the 10-minute mark, I am going to show you the specific commercial mechanism of the Reebok offer that the mainstream coverage is treating as the straightforward commercial consequence of a governance decision, when it is actually the most institutionally significant commercial accountability statement the governance accountability story has produced, and the one that changes how every commercial entity in the athletic footwear market evaluates its governance-related commercial decisions going forward. The commercial dimension of the Clark era's governance accountability story has been building throughout the season through the accumulation of individual and joint commercial developments that we have covered in detail across the preceding videos in this series. The Jordan Brand combined deal with Clark and Cunningham established the most commercially significant joint commercial proposition in women's basketball history. The $3 billion Clark commercial ecosystem established the most commercially significant individual commercial foundation in the sport's history. The Adidas relationship with Cunningham established her commercial independence as a genuine and substantial individual commercial proposition, rather than simply a commercially adjacent relationship to Clark's individual ecosystem. And the accumulation of every commercial development throughout the accountability season has been building the specific commercial conditions that make the Reebok offer to Cunningham the most commercially specific and the most commercially direct accountability statement the governance accountability story has yet produced. Because the offer represents the athletic footwear commercial market formally and publicly acting on the commercial accountability logic that the governance accountability season's most consequential disciplinary and organizational decisions have produced, in the most market-specific and the most commercially direct form available to a commercial entity, responding to the governance accountability story's most consequential individual conduct and disciplinary developments. Reebok making a commercial offer to Cunningham to replace Carrington is not simply a brand pursuing a commercial opportunity in the athletic footwear market. It is the commercial market's most specific and most publicly documented accountability statement that the governance-driven departure of one commercial partner and the governance-driven prominence of the player, most directly harmed by that partner's conduct together, create a commercial opportunity that the market is most appropriately serving through the specific commercial offer the Reebok announcement represents. Let us start with what Reebok's offer to Cunningham specifically involves, because the precise commercial terms and the specific commercial logic of the offer are the analytical foundation of everything that follows, and the mainstream coverage has been treating the offer primarily as a commercial development. rather than examining the specific commercial accountability mechanism the offer represents and why that mechanism changes how the governance accountability story is being processed in the commercial ecosystem that the governance apparatus's disciplinary decisions have most directly affected through their commercial consequences. Reebok's offer to Cunningham is organized around the specific commercial opportunity the combination of Carrington's official ban and Cunningham's own commercial profile has created in the athletic footwear market at the intersection of governance accountability and commercial market opportunity. The commercial logic of the offer has two distinct dimensions that each tell you something specific about how the commercial ecosystem is processing the governance accountability story's most consequential commercial developments. The first dimension is the commercial vacancy dimension, the specific recognition that the governance-driven departure of Carrington from the competitive ecosystem has created an athletic footwear commercial space. Whatever the specific terms of any prior commercial relationship Carrington had with athletic footwear brands, that the commercial market can most appropriately fill through a commercial offer to the most commercially credible and the most governance accountability validated available alternative in the specific competitive and commercial context the governance accountability season has produced. The second dimension is the commercial validation dimension, the specific recognition that Cunningham's individual commercial profile, established through the Adidas relationship and the Jordan brand combined deal, and the accumulated commercial and governance accountability standing the advocacy season has produced, represents a commercial proposition whose specific combination of competitive excellence, commercial credibility, and governance accountability prominence makes her the most commercially appropriate and the most market-specifically validated available recipient of the commercial offer the governance-driven vacancy has created. The combination of those two commercial dimensions in a single Reebok offer creates the specific commercial accountability mechanism that transforms the governance accountability story from an institutional and disciplinary narrative into a commercial market accountability narrative in the most market-specific and the most commercially direct form the athletic footwear commercial ecosystem can produce. Now let us talk about Carrington losing it specifically, and why the specific nature of the reaction to Reebok's offer to Cunningham is the most commercially revealing individual response the Clark era's governance accountability story has generated. Carrington has been processing the full weight of the governance accountability season's most comprehensive institutional turning against throughout the most recent chapter of the story. From the official ban, through the franchise firing, through the accountability coalition's most prominent interventions, through the meltdown that the comprehensive simultaneous institutional turning against produced in its most personally concentrated form. Each of those institutional developments produced specific individual reactions that the previous videos have documented and analyzed in their most complete institutional and human complexity. But the reaction to Reebok's offer to Cunningham is different in its specific commercial nature from every previous institutional development's individual reaction, because it is the first development in the governance accountability story whose most immediately personal impact is specifically commercial rather than institutional, disciplinary, or competitive. Carrington losing it over a brand making a commercial offer to Cunningham to replace her is the reaction of an individual experiencing the specific form of commercial accountability that the market's most direct and most personally concentrated response to the governance-driven departure produces. And the specific nature of what losing it means in the commercial accountability context is the analytical dimension that the mainstream coverage is treating as the dramatic emotional expression of competitive and personal frustration when it is actually the most commercially specific individual response to commercial market accountability that the governance accountability story has produced. The commercial loss, whatever its specific magnitude in the athletic footwear market, is experienced differently from the institutional loss of the official ban and the organizational loss of the franchise firing because it represents the market's specific and publicly documented commercial assessment of the value differential the governance accountability story has produced between Carrington's commercial standing and Cunningham's commercial standing in the most direct and the most market-specific commercial accountability form available to the athletic footwear commercial ecosystem. Now let us talk about what the commercial logic of Reebok's specific decision means for every brand and commercial entity in the athletic footwear market, and the broader women's basketball commercial ecosystem, because this is the analytically significant layer that the mainstream coverage is treating as the background commercial context of a dramatic individual reaction story, when it is actually the most institutionally consequential commercial accountability development the Clark era's governance accountability story has produced. Every brand and commercial entity in the athletic footwear market is simultaneously processing the Reebok offer to Cunningham as both a specific commercial opportunity development and a commercial accountability precedent that establishes the most market-specific and the most publicly documented commercial logic for how athletic footwear brands should respond to governance-driven competitive ecosystem departures in the specific commercial context the Clark era's most consequential governance accountability season has produced. The commercial accountability precedent the Reebok offer establishes is that governance-driven departures from the competitive ecosystem create specific and publicly recognizable commercial opportunities, whose most appropriate market response is a commercial offer to the most commercially credible and the most governance accountability validated available alternative in the specific competitive and commercial context the governance-driven departure has produced, and the specific form of that precedent is the most commercially direct governance accountability statement that any athletic footwear brand has made in response to any governance accountability development in the Clark era's most dramatic season. The precedent changes how every other brand and commercial entity in the athletic footwear market evaluates its governance-related commercial decisions going forward, because the Reebok offer to Cunningham formally and publicly establishes that the commercial market's most appropriate response to governance-driven competitive ecosystem changes includes commercial offers to the most governance accountability validated available alternatives in the specific competitive and commercial context the governance-driven changes have produced. Now let us zoom all the way out, because Carrington losing it after Reebok makes an offer to Cunningham to replace her is the commercial accountability event that most specifically and most directly personalizes the governance accountability transformation the Clark era's most dramatic season has been building toward by translating its most consequential institutional and disciplinary developments into the most commercially direct and the most market-specifically documented form available to the athletic footwear commercial ecosystem. The entire arc of the governance accountability season has been producing institutional, disciplinary, and organizational accountability developments, whose commercial implications we have analyzed in detail across the preceding videos, but whose most directly market-specific and most commercially personal expressions have been less visible than the institutional and governance dimensions that the governance accountability framing most naturally foregrounds. The Reebok offer to Cunningham makes the commercial accountability dimension of the governance accountability transformation visible in its most market-specific and its most commercially personal form by producing a specific and publicly documented commercial market response to the governance-driven competitive ecosystem. Changes that translates the institutional and disciplinary accountability the governance apparatus has produced into the most commercially direct and the most personally concentrated commercial accountability that the athletic footwear market can generate through its most standard commercial decision-making mechanisms. Carrington losing it is the most personally concentrated individual expression of that commercial accountability, arriving in its most directly personal form. And the specific nature of the reaction reveals the commercial accountability dimension of the governance accountability transformation in the most humanly accessible and the most commercially specific form that any individual reaction to any accountability development in the Clark era's most dramatic season has produced. Remember the most institutionally significant commercial accountability mechanism detail? Here it is. The specific commercial mechanism of the Reebok offer that makes it the most institutionally significant commercial accountability statement the governance accountability story has produced is not the commercial opportunity dimension of the offer, the specific commercial vacancy that Carrington's governance-driven departure has created and that Reebok is proposing to fill through the Cunningham offer. It is the commercial validation dimension of the offer, the specific public and formally documented commercial market assessment that Cunningham's governance accountability validated commercial profile is the most commercially appropriate and the most market-specifically credible available recipient of the commercial offer the governance-driven vacancy has created, because that commercial validation is the market's most direct and most specifically documented accountability statement that the governance accountability season's most consequential disciplinary and organizational decisions have produced a commercially measurable difference between the commercial standing of the player whose conduct produced those decisions and the commercial standing of the player whose conduct and advocacy have been most specifically validated by those decisions. Here is what the mainstream coverage is almost entirely missing about the Reebok offer and Carrington losing it, and why together they matter beyond the immediate commercial drama of a brand making an offer to a player to replace a departing partner. The specific commercial accountability precedent the Reebok offer establishes for how athletic footwear brands respond to governance-driven competitive ecosystem changes is the commercial accountability dimension that has the most lasting implications for how the governance accountability transformation the Clark era's most dramatic season has been building toward is understood and processed in the commercial ecosystem that the governance apparatus's disciplinary decisions have most directly affected through their commercial consequences. The athletic footwear commercial market's governance-related commercial decision-making has historically been organized around competitive performance metrics rather than governance accountability considerations, with brand commercial decisions about player partnerships being driven primarily by competitive excellence, commercial appeal, and market positioning rather than by governance accountability assessments of the players whose conduct the governance apparatus's disciplinary decisions have most specifically addressed. The Reebok offer to Cunningham formally and publicly introduces governance accountability as a commercially relevant consideration in athletic footwear brand partnership decisions, in the specific form that makes the commercial market's governance-related commercial decision-making most directly responsive to the governance accountability transformation the governance apparatus's most consequential disciplinary decisions have produced. The specific governance accountability commercial consideration the Reebok offer introduces is the publicly documented commercial market assessment that governance-driven competitive ecosystem departures create commercial opportunities whose most appropriate market response includes commercial offers to the most governance accountability validated available alternatives in the specific competitive and commercial context the governance-driven departures have produced, and that consideration is the most commercially direct and the most market-specifically actionable governance accountability insight the Reebok offer contributes to the commercial ecosystem's processing of the governance accountability transformation. The second hidden angle is the specific effect of the Reebok offer on Cunningham's individual commercial standing in the athletic footwear market independently of the Adidas relationship and the Jordan brand combined deal. Because the Reebok offer represents a third major athletic footwear brand, formally and publicly assessing Cunningham's individual commercial profile as sufficiently credible and sufficiently governance accountability validated to warrant a direct commercial offer in the most competitive and the most commercially significant single commercial category in women's basketball's most commercially significant era. My verdict on the Reebok offer to Cunningham and Carrington losing it is this. Stated directly and with the commercial accountability mechanism dimension, the specific significance of the commercial development most urgently requires the analytical framework to engage with honestly and completely. Reebok making an offer to Sophie Cunningham to replace Dijonai Carrington and Carrington losing it in response is the most commercially specific and the most market-directly documented commercial accountability development the Clark era's governance accountability story has produced, establishing through the most standard commercial decision-making mechanism available to the athletic footwear market a formally and publicly documented commercial validation that the governance accountability transformation the governance apparatus's most consequential disciplinary decisions have produced is commercially measurable in the specific form of a brand commercial offer to the most governance accountability validated available alternative. In the governance-driven commercial vacancy, the official ban and franchise firing have created. The first reason this verdict is correct is the commercial accountability mechanism dimension. The specific commercial mechanism of the Reebok offer, making a formal commercial offer to the most governance accountability validated available alternative to fill the governance-driven commercial vacancy, is the most market-directly documented commercial accountability statement any athletic footwear brand has made in response to any governance accountability development in the Clark era's most dramatic season, and the institutional significance of that commercial accountability statement is what makes the Reebok offer the most commercially consequential single-brand commercial decision the governance accountability story has produced. The second reason is the commercial precedent dimension. The governance accountability commercial precedent the Reebok offer establishes for how athletic footwear brands respond to governance-driven competitive ecosystem changes is the most lasting commercial accountability contribution the offer makes to the governance accountability transformation the Clark era's most dramatic season has been building toward. And the specific form of that precedent changes how every other brand and commercial entity in the athletic footwear market evaluates its governance-related commercial decisions going forward in the most market-specifically direct and the most commercially actionable form. The third reason is what Carrington losing it reveals. The specific commercial accountability form of Carrington losing it over Reebok's offer to Cunningham is the most commercially concentrated individual expression of the governance accountability transformation, arriving in its most directly personal commercial form. And the specific nature of the reaction reveals the commercial accountability dimension of the governance accountability transformation in the most humanly accessible and the most commercially specific form that any individual reaction to any accountability development in the Clark era's most dramatic season has produced. The strongest counter-argument is that the Reebok offer to Cunningham is primarily a commercial opportunity decision, rather than a governance accountability statement, and that analyzing it as the most institutionally significant commercial accountability development, the governance accountability story has produced over-attributes governance accountability motivations to what might be primarily a straightforward commercial market opportunity response. That argument has genuine merit as a commercial motivation attribution caution. The counter to the counter is that the specific form of the commercial opportunity the Reebok offer responds to, a governance-driven competitive ecosystem departure that has created a specific commercial vacancy in the athletic footwear market simultaneously with the governance-driven prominence of the most governance accountability validated available alternative in that market, makes the governance accountability dimension of the commercial opportunity inseparable from the commercial opportunity dimension in the specific commercial context the governance accountability season has produced. And the specific combination of those two simultaneously inseparable dimensions is what makes the Reebok offer the most institutionally significant commercial accountability statement, rather than simply a straightforward commercial market opportunity response. So tell me in the comments right now, does Reebok making an offer to Cunningham to replace Carrington represent the most market-specifically direct commercial accountability statement the Clark era's governance accountability story has produced? And does Carrington losing it in response represent the most commercially concentrated individual expression of the governance accountability transformation arriving in its most directly personal commercial form? Drop your answer, because this is the commercial accountability question that most directly reveals how the commercial ecosystem's most standard commercial decision-making mechanisms process the governance accountability transformation in its most market-specifically direct and its most personally concentrated commercial form.